so thanks so much for having me. Thank you to Barry and everyone at Gray Area for inviting me. I'm Angela Washko, and I am a research-based artist making video games, written works, videos, performances, and interventions, often within video game and internet enclave contexts. Today in my talk, I'm going to focus on my projects investigating niche languages formed in specific online communities. I'll mostly talk about the game, which, have any of you had the chance to play it? It's like right around the corner. Oh, okay, great. So you'll have a different experience probably than this. But I want to talk a lot about that, but I have to give you a little bit of context for where I'm coming from and how I got there. With that project. There's also some adult content in this presentation, and I'll try to give adequate warnings when we get to it. Well, okay. So backing up, I'm going to start with one project very briefly to give you a sense of the kinds of processes and politics that were informing the work that I'll show after it. For 4 years, I created performative interventions inside World of Warcraft, the massively multiplayer online role-playing game, if you're not familiar. So instead of killing enemies and getting more badass equipment like I had for the 6 years prior as a very serious WoW player, as the Council on Gender Sensitivity and Behavioral Awareness in World of Warcraft, I started traveling to highly populated virtual towns in the game to discuss the ways in which women were treated inside the game space, along with other players. WoW has had a player base that's pretty notorious for being quite hostile toward women, members of the LGBTQIA community, and people of color. The project over time shifted in intention from initially wanting to change the communal language in the space to be more inclusive, to ultimately realizing how colonial that impulse was and trying to sort of remake the game in my own perspective. And then sort of shifted away from that to trying to create a presence and public visibility for the issues of exclusivity that players face in the space by meeting and talking about it regularly. Through the 4 years of the project, the council had a generally appreciated and very active presence on the primary server that I played on, and an intentional inclusive guild, so cooperative of players, was created as a result of regularly hosting these conversations as the community came up with long-term ways for the project to live on without my facilitation, which was pretty much my goal. That's the fastest description of this project that I've ever given, and there's a lot more nuance and a lot of self-criticality missing from that explanation. If you're interested in the nuances of the project, there's a pretty comprehensive essay I wrote for Creative Time called Why Talk Feminism in World of Warcraft, and documentation from the project on my website. Okay, so in the midst of that long-term project, I started another, which also focused on facilitating dialogue with niche internet communities that are not inclusive to women. Starting in 2014, I became very interested in a figure named Recipient. His writing and ideology seemed to overlap with a lot of the men I was talking to inside WoW who identify as men's rights activists or members of the online manosphere. So after seeing a lot of writing circulate on the internet about his book, Don't Bang Denmark, a country where I'd just been living, I decided to investigate further and began to read his books, his blogs, and his incredibly active Recipient community forum. In case you're not familiar, Recipient has been called the most infamous misogynist on the internet and spends his time traveling around the world teaching men how to perform in particular ways in order to have sex with as many women as possible across geographic, language, and cultural barriers as quickly as possible. He writes a series of travel guides called Bang, Day Bang, Bang Iceland, Bang Poland, Bang Ukraine, Bang Colombia, Don't Bang Denmark, and so on. I did not make this image. He's also the founder of Return of Kings, a very active online blog with many writers devoted to neo-masculinity, an ideological term used by Rush and his followers to identify men who want to return to a radically traditional family values, sort of America, and would like to see women have their right to vote revoked, among many, frankly, infuriatingly conservative things. Anyway, Banged emerged out of reading his books, blogs, and community forum. After reading so much of his writing for his devoted community of followers, one thing really stuck out to me. In Rush's accounts of his sexual exploits, the perspective of the women he's explicitly talking about in his books and blogs are never represented. So I decided that I wanted to create a web and book-based project through which I'd hope to give the supposedly thousands of women that Ratchye has slept with, using the extremely aggressive strategies outlined in his book, an opportunity to anonymously report their experiences. After pursuing mainstream media distribution of my call for these women, it occurred to me that Ratchye knew about my project, as he wrote about it on his Twitter account. His awareness of the project changed it for me. He became less of an abstract villain that I was free to run a media-savvy smear campaign on, and more of a person and more of a subject. I decided that I should stop mimicking the shock media tactics that, frankly, his own community would use in a different way, and move toward investigating further into actually trying to understand his motivations and the appeal that he and his practice held for his growing community of followers, many of whom now make up what is being politically called the alt-right. So I pursued getting Ratchye to do an interview with me via Skype. This took months of email negotiating and literally sending him one question per day over email at his request while he tested my commitment to the project and our collaboration. The video interview ended up being accidentally 2 hours long and was very exhausting. If you want to see the whole thing online, it's very easy to find. I posted it completely unedited. I'm just going to show a short clip from the interview so you can get a sense of it. It's really hard to get a good feel for it from 2 minutes, so I hope the curation that I made is helpful. That I'm going to show. And I do want to say that there is some sexually explicit talk in this clip. We have a very frank discussion about orgasms. Let's imagine that I do somehow find 20 women that have slept with you. What do you think these women might say about the seduction process and your sexual performance?
I would say that they would probably say that I approached them with good energy. I didn't scare them. I made them feel comfortable. Mm-hmm. I didn't come on really strong, but at the same time, I didn't come in with such a low energy that they weren't interested. Mm-hmm. I'm really good at keeping a conversation going, even if the girl is not giving me a lot back. I make everything feel natural, from how I touch and kiss, and I mean, it's rarely the point where a girl will have to stop me and say, no, I don't like it when you touch me there. Because I can read them. I know, but based on how they act, how they talk, how they move, when they want me to do the next step. And after sex, I get lazy because now I already got most of what I wanted. So I just want a girl to have the lowest possible expectations. So if I'm having a day where I don't want to try, so it's actually a blessing and a curse to be good in bed, but I'm not. So
you mentioned your orgasm is of primary importance, and that you don't go down on women. Is this true? Can I ask why?
We have because nature has deemed the male orgasm to be more important. If right now a magic cloud of gas surrounds the earth and infected girls and prevented them from ever having a female orgasm again, the human species would go on still. But if this cloud of gas only affected men and prevented the male orgasm, what would happen? The human species is done. It is freaking done. Therefore, nature, not me, nature has declared that the male orgasm is essential to life, to life. But the female orgasm is like a cherry on top. You know, if she gets it, hey, that's great, yummy. But if not, it doesn't matter. So I believe in what nature has said about it.
Oh, the things that have been said under the guise of being about nature. All right, so this here is a video which is normally accompanied with audio that I made from one of the emails I got nearly daily over the course of the project from Ratchye's community members after the interview. This project ended up taking on a lot of forms. Ratchye was initially very enthusiastic about my search and the project in general, probably because of the media attention. And his community initially appreciated the 2-hour-long unedited interview because I acknowledged that I was a self-identified feminist, inclined to disagree with him but was willing to maintain civility with regards to my interview questions and my overall demeanor. However, as mainstream media continued to be interested in my search for his partners, his community became more and more frustrated that the media had an overall negative view of Roosh despite an unedited 2-hour-long interview with him. His community debated my project and harassed me over email, social media, comment sections of mainstream news sites, and a massive and still ongoing comment thread on the Roosh v. forum, and additionally wrote threatening statements to employers, friends, peers, and colleagues in an attempt to discredit what I was doing. They let me know that they knew where I lived and worked and continued to sexually harass me, send me rape and death threats, and accuse me of stalking Roosh. As the project continued to get more attention, Roosh himself also suggested that if I continued my search, he would sue me for libel. I'm talking about this issue not to play up a victim narrative, as I recognize myself certainly as an agent who started this whole thing, but I want to make it clear that in this context, unlike World of Warcraft, where I'm here not protected by an avatar, when I interact with this online community, certainly there comes a higher risk. As a performer who had seen real impact on the space in World of Warcraft as a result of my actions as the council, I naively applied some of the same logic and strategies to this project without realizing the primary difference in my position in these two spaces. In WoW, I was recognizable as a long-term, high-level member of the community with high-level gear, only obtained through years of commitment to the game, clearly a participant and not an outsider. In Roosh V's manosphere, I'm an enemy, a symbol of everything wrong in today's world to them, someone who operates against their values, and someone who, regardless of attempts to perform civility, and even at times, sometimes slipped into something that felt like empathy, there was no way that this project would have ended smoothly for me. If you've been reading that. Just imagine having that for every day. My Twitter account is now private. So the project ended up being published in book form, installed in art galleries as a sort of visualized timeline of the experience from the sort of initial idea to the outcomes. I then turned it into a storytelling performance where I outline the meandering nature of the project, and then talk about also finally being unable to publish the accounts of women I interviewed for fear of their safety. I wrote extensively about the project in UCSD-based Field Journal of Socially Engaged Art Criticism, if you want to learn more, because this was also a very short version. And I just want to jump into the game. Okay. So toward the end of the Banged project, something I felt that was getting in the way of the work was my performance role. The project did very much ultimately become about my experience operating in this field. Despite my experience, I haven't abandoned this field, as you'll see in the next project, or as you experience by playing the game. But I'm putting myself out of the spotlight through this and making the project less about my mediation of and intervention in these spaces, and more about creating an embodied way for people to digest experiences from and ideologies of these manosphere seduction communities. There's so much information, behavioral psychology, and coded language in this field, and a lot of it is very painful to process, especially if you're a woman. And so with all of the experience I now have mapping the field, as a researcher, I'm able to put myself in the position to filter it all into a game scenario so that one might actually walk away being able to make sense of it without having to spend as much time as I have, and hopefully develop some tactics to respond to it. Okay, so the game. So after completing the Bang project, followers of other seduction gurus reached out to me pretty often to tell me that Roosh's variety of pickup art was much more extreme and much more misogynistic than other types that are more focused on teaching men confidence and self-improvement to help level the dating playing field. I thought that was totally a valid point, so I decided to take a deeper look into the variety of pickup artist gurus, or seduction coaches, and the differences between the types of pickup art that they're teaching, and ultimately make a game about them. I just want to give a bit of a warning as we go through this section that there are some mentions of sexual assault and some evidence of non-consensual behavior, so I'll give you warnings before I show a particularly brutal clip, but yeah, so, and the game itself, when you play it, gives you a context warning right away. So in case you didn't get it from the title, The Game is a play on the best-selling book by Neil Strauss, The Game, which was the first mainstream primer into this world, which originated as a couple of guys with a community forum and turned into a very lucrative lifestyle for some. So I made sort of a playable version of this book in a way, but looking at the entire field, not just the specific artists, pickup artists represented in the book. The first chapter of The Game, which is on display here, not the full-length version because it's still in process, it was first exhibited as an installation with research materials at the New York City New Media Gallery Transfer. The band Shoo Shoo, actually I'm going to play this and talk over it really quickly. I'm going to turn that down. So the band Shoo Shoo, coordinated mostly by Jamie Stewart, composed the soundtrack to The Game. So when you play it, it has a very moody, very dark and intense musical score. And yeah, I just wanted to give them some credit and help get you into the psychic space of the rest that I'm going to talk about. Okay, there's so much more over there. So The Game is, in my mind, a thoroughly research-based video game project in which I studied the different seduction techniques of famous pickup artists and allow these pickup artists to speak for themselves through their work and put players in the position of interacting with them in a very common location for pickup art, a bar. Players, regardless of personal gender identity, are put into the position of experiencing a common scenario that femme-presenting people experience, having their personal space invaded when it's unwelcome by men who feel entitled to it. Chapter 1 focuses on research material from infamous pickup artist Julien Blanc's first major multi-DVD training program, PIMP, and his more recent video program, Shift and 10 Game. This is what the PIMP program costs now. Quite a discount from its original price tag. All of the dialogue in the game is constructed from actual word-for-word advice written by these pickup artists, and also situations from their own hidden camera footage that they sell to their devoted followers. A lot of these coaching materials are prohibitively expensive and not available in full online, I hypothesize, to keep people who aren't looking to learn from them from finding out about them. Because there are some ethical questions there. But I got a grant, so I bought a bunch of them. So I'm going to show an example of an excerpt from one of Julien Blanc's videos from PIMP, including an in-field hidden camera video. And again, I just want to mention that it's not particularly graphic, but he does perform in a way that I would categorize as distinctly non-consensual. So I certainly won't be offended if you don't want to see it. Okay, here we go.
So when I'm like, you know what, after party, let's go, I'm gonna throw in the word now. Okay, like, you know what, after party, now. Boom, and I will order and command now. Now.
Oh, sorry, I just wanted to make it a little bit louder. Let's just hear it again. Whew. Okay.
So when I'm like, you know what, after party, let's go, I'm gonna throw in the word now. Okay, like, you know what, after party, now. Boom, and I will order and command now. Now. Okay, listen, you don't have to if you don't want to, but let's go now. Okay, we get along, right? After party, now. Adventure, now. Let's go, now. This second, now. This second, now. Okay, I'm gonna hammer that shit in. I'll also do like, you know what, after party, because otherwise I have to go. AKA, it has to happen now. Okay, so keep that in mind. Take the responsibility off of the girl and create a sense of urgency.
Kiss me goodbye, a real kiss.
No, we're
very
done.
nice guys. I'll never see you again.
We're just assholes.
Don't give a shit.
But Julian is Frenchman.
Hey, we have so much in common.
Apologies.
What do we have in common? What do you
Pleasure to
mean?
meet you.
The
Pleasure.
connection. We're just like,
Ridiculous.
we're too similar.
Erica,
She won't see.
no.
I'll hide it. I have massive shoulders. She won't see.
Get out of town.
That's what she said. Okay, real fast, real fast.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
A real kiss, not she.
You're crazy.
She's gone. Okay, we already kissed. It's too late. Give her a real kiss.
You're crazy.
Redemption. It's like a video game. Redemption. Are you gonna cheat on a shitty kiss?
No.
That's a good point.
Am I gonna cheat on a shitty
You already
Yeah.
cheated. You already cheated.
even mean?
You
Yeah.
cheated on a fiance on a shitty kiss. Is that really what you want?
Where
2 minutes.
Where
Come
did
here.
you guys come
Wait,
from?
can I just hug you goodbye? I'll hug you goodbye.
You can give me a hug,
Goodbye.
okay?
2 minutes. Come with me and kiss me. 2 minutes.
No, no, no,
2 minutes.
no,
2
no,
minutes.
it's
2
not.
minutes. Okay, kiss me. See.
No, 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 no.
She can't see. My friend's talking to her.
So this pretty much covers, like aligning the emotional side of her brain with the logical side of her brain.
Like a minute, so I'm gonna close up. But I showed that video, not to shock you or anything like that, but to illustrate that this moment presented in Julian's hidden camera footage is represented in the game. As a player, if you continue to engage with him to the point that you end up outside of the bar and are invited to leave the venue with him, even when you push back, you may be physically moved around and touched sexually without your consent. This is not me inventing what Julian is like in any way, and that's very important to me, but rather presenting him and his behaviors in the ways that he has presented them himself to his curated audience. After each interaction, you're prompted with a series of options, but you can experience that for yourself if you like. And after, as a player and the target of pickup artist attention, you can make a broad range of decisions in Chapter 1 of the game, from opting to hook up with different pickup artists in multiple locations to attempting to get away from them immediately. And it's not particularly moralizing. You can do any of these things, but it is through the perspective that particularly Julian has explained how it would happen. So yeah, it's not finished. There'll be 4 chapters, not just 1, and have all of these other pickup artists and hopefully get distributed in more of a gaming context ultimately. These are just some stills. The game was made from hundreds of handmade and digitally manipulated cyanotypes. So here's some of them real quick. Some on paper, some on ceramic tile. And this is what it looks like when they're combined. I really wanted the game to feel experientially not like any other game, and that's why I brought back some of my background in more traditional art processes rather than the sort of all-digital sprite-based RPG look that I initially planned. Anyway, so yeah, it'll be released online soon, hopefully by the end of 2017. Please do play it in the exhibition. I also want to add that it's actually also quite funny in some ways. I know the way that I explained it here is very particular, but for example, Julian is obsessed with Twilight and the Vampire Diaries series and has a great deal of pickup lines involving these things. It's just that in my presentation about it here, sometimes this field seems very easy to dismiss as not real or as trivial, and so in this talk I really wanted to share with you some of the gravity of the situation by seeing it in practice. Thank you.